Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadowman Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Robert Kowalski, but everyone calls me Bob. I've been a ranger at Denali National Park for 17 years now, and I've seen things out here that would make most people pack up and leave Alaska forever. But what happened in February of 1983 changed me in ways I still can't fully explain. I grew up in Chicago, about as far from wilderness as you can get. Joined the Army right out of high school, did 2 tours, came back different. Alaska seemed like a good place to disappear into work and forget. The Park Service took me on, trained me in high-altitude rescue, and I found I was good at it. Real good. 47 successful rescues in 17 years, even in the worst conditions you can imagine. I lived year-round at the Wonder Lake Ranger Station, 85 miles deep in the park. Most rangers rotate out for winter, but I stayed. Liked the quiet. Liked being alone with just my dog team and the mountains. My ex-wife used to say I preferred dogs to people, and maybe she was right. The Athabascan elders who worked summers in the park would tell stories around the fire. Stories about Kushtaka, shape-shifting otter spirits that lived in the frozen lakes and rivers. They said these creatures could mimic human voices, lure people out onto thin ice, and steal their warmth until they were nothing but frozen shells. I'd smile and nod, same way you do when someone tells you about Bigfoot or UFOs. Respected the culture, but didn't believe a word of it. Until February 14th, 1983, Valentine's Day. The irony wasn't lost on me later. The call came in around noon, though noon was just a brief gray twilight that time of year. We only got about 4 hours of weak light daily. The rest was darkness so complete it felt like being underwater. A solo mountaineer named Marcus Chen had been overdue for 5 days. His last radio contact mentioned something about hearing voices and something following him near Wonder Lake. Park headquarters wanted me to check it out. Standard search and rescue. I'd done hundreds of these. The temperature was sitting at -40 when I loaded my sled. My lead dog, Bear, kept whining and pulling away from the lake trail. That should have been my first warning. Bear had never refused a trail in 8 years. I figured the cold was getting to him, or maybe he smelled a wolf pack nearby. "Come on, boy," I said, checking my gear one more time. Garmin GPS unit, VHF radio, avalanche transceiver, ice axes, crampons, and my -40 sleeping bag. Everything by the book. Just another rescue. Bear looked at me with those dark eyes, and I swear to God, he looked afraid. We set out at 1 p.m., just as the sky was starting its slow fade to black. The aurora was already dancing overhead, bright green ribbons that cast weird shadows across the snow, made everything look like it was moving, even when it wasn't. The trail to Wonder Lake usually took 3 hours by dog sled. It's a beautiful run in summer through spruce forests and across open tundra, with Mount Denali rising like a god in the distance. In February, it was a frozen hell. The dog's breath came out in clouds so thick I could barely see the trail. Ice crystals hung in the air, making the beam from my headlamp scatter into 1,000 tiny rainbows. We made good time for the first hour. Then the dogs started acting strange. Bear slowed down first, then the whole team followed. Their ears went flat against their heads. They were making this low whining sound I'd never heard before. Not scared of a wolf or bear, something different, something deeper. Mush, I called, using the Athabascan commands old Tom Nakamura had taught me. Mush. They moved, but slow, like they were pulling through mud instead of powder snow. That's when I noticed the temperature. I'd been in -40 for hours and was dressed for it. But suddenly I could feel cold penetrating my gear. Real cold. The kind that makes your teeth ache and your lungs burn. I checked my thermometer. -60. That didn't make sense. Weather forecast said -40, maybe dropping to -45 overnight. A 20-degree drop in minutes wasn't natural. The ice of Wonder Lake stretched out before us, a flat white expanse surrounded by black spruce trees that looked like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The aurora was going crazy overhead now, bright enough to read by. And that's when I heard my radio crackle. Not with voices, with screaming, children screaming. I grabbed the radio, twisted the dial. Wonder Lake Station, this is Ranger Kowalski, do you copy? More screaming, high-pitched, terrified, like kids being hurt. Headquarters, come in. The screaming stopped. My radio hissed with static, then a voice came through. My voice. Don't cross the lake, Bob. Don't cross the lake. Don't cross. I dropped the radio in the snow, picked it up with shaking hands, but it was dead now, completely silent. Bear had stopped moving entirely. The whole team was planted in the snow, refusing to go forward. I could see Marcus Chen's last known campsite on the far side of the lake, maybe 2 miles across the ice. The ice was thick this time of year, at least 4 feet. Safe. Should be safe. I decided to walk ahead, scout the route. Sometimes dogs pick up on thin ice better than instruments can detect. I grabbed my ice axe and walked 20 feet onto the lake. The ice beneath my boots groaned. Not the normal creaking of a frozen lake, but a sound that reminded me of whale songs I'd heard on a Navy documentary once. Long, low, mournful sounds that seemed to come from deep below. And then I saw the footprints, human footprints, leading from the shore out toward the middle of the lake. Marcus Chen's boots. I recognized the tread pattern from his rescue file. Size 11 sorrel caribous, same as mine. I followed the prints for about 50 feet. Then they changed. The boot prints just stopped. And in their place were animal tracks. Otter tracks, but huge, each print the size of my hand. And they didn't appear gradually, like Marcus had taken off his boots. The boot prints ended mid-stride, and the otter prints began in the exact same spots, like his feet had transformed as he walked. My training kicked in. Hypothermia causes confusion, hallucinations. Maybe Marcus had taken his boots off in some kind of cold-induced delirium, and someone's pet otter had wandered by. Made sense. Had to make sense. Except otters don't come out in -60-degree weather. And the prints were fresh, maybe an hour old. Nothing was fresh out here. Everything froze solid in minutes. I went back to the sled and tried the radio again. Nothing. Checked my GPS unit. It said I was at an elevation of 8,000 feet. Wonder Lake sits at 2,400 feet above sea level. I knew that fact cold. The GPS had to be malfunctioning. Aurora interference was common up here, played hell with electronics. But then I noticed something else on the GPS screen. It showed the lake as a mountain where the flat ice should be. I looked up. Flat ice. Looked down at the screen. Mountain. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. "Okay, Bob," I said out loud. "Equipment failure. Standard procedure. Make camp, wait for backup, reassess in daylight." But there wasn't going to be daylight. Not real daylight. Just 4 hours of gray twilight and then darkness again. And the temperature was still dropping. I needed to find Marcus. He'd been out here for 5 days. If he was still alive, he wouldn't last another night. I got the dogs moving again by leading Bear myself, walking ahead with the rope in my hand. They followed reluctantly, staying close together. Smart animals. They knew something I didn't. We made it halfway across the lake before I saw the camp. Marcus Chen's tent was still standing, perfectly intact. A small orange dome against the white snow, maybe 300 yards ahead. I could see his sled parked nearby, his gear organized in neat piles the way an experienced mountaineer would arrange things. But no Marcus. "Hello?" I called. "Marcus Chen, this is Park Service." My voice echoed weird across the ice. Came back wrong, like someone else was shouting words I hadn't said. The dogs wouldn't go closer to the camp. Bear sat down hard in the snow and wouldn't budge. I tied them off to my ice axe, planted deep, and walked to the tent alone. The tent zipper was open. Inside, Marcus's sleeping bag was laid out, his stove set up, even a book lying open like he'd just stepped away to take a leak. Everything normal. Except the book was frozen solid. The pages were ice. And there was frost on the inside of the tent. Thick, white frost. The kind that builds up over weeks in an unheated space. But Marcus had only been gone a few hours when he'd made that last radio call. Frost like that should have taken days to form. I backed out of the tent and stood up. That's when I saw the body under the ice. 10 feet from the tent, the ice was crystal clear, smooth as glass, and beneath it, maybe 3 feet down, I could see Marcus Chen staring up at me. His eyes were wide open. His mouth was frozen in a scream, stretched so wide I could see his back teeth. His hands were pressed against the underside of the ice like he'd been trying to push through. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was his face. It wasn't blue or white like a drowning victim should be. It were wrong, shriveled, like something had sucked all the warmth and moisture out of him, leaving just a frozen husk. His skin looked like paper, and I could see his skull clearly underneath. I'd seen a lot of bodies in my career, climbers who fell, hikers who froze, tourists who ignored warnings. This was different. This was something else. I stumbled backward and pulled out my radio, forgetting it was dead. Shook it. Nothing. Then I heard the giggling. A child laughing, high and sweet, like a little girl playing somewhere nearby. It echoed across the frozen lake, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" The giggling stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard the ice groan again. That whale song sound, but closer now. And underneath it, something else. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like something large moving just below the surface. I ran back to my dogs. Bear was going crazy, barking and lunging against the rope. The other dogs had their hackles raised, teeth bared at the ice. That's when I saw it move. Under the ice, maybe 30 feet away, something dark was swimming. Something big and fast. It passed beneath me, and I felt the ice shift, not crack, shift. Like the whole frozen surface of the lake was just a thin skin over something much deeper than I'd thought. The shape circled back, came closer, and then it stopped directly below me. Through the ice I could see it clearly now. An otter, but huge, the size of a bear. Sleek black fur rippling in water that shouldn't exist under 4 feet of solid ice. It looked up at me, and I saw its face. A human face. A child's face with dead black eyes and a mouth full of needle teeth. It smiled at me. Then it was gone, swimming away faster than anything natural could move. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Jesus Christ, what the hell?" My radio crackled to life. Bob. A woman's voice, familiar. Bob, can you hear me? It's Jenny. Jenny Nakamura. Another ranger, daughter of old Tom, who taught me those Athabascan commands. She was based at headquarters, but sometimes helped with backcountry rescues. Jenny, thank God. I'm at Wonder Lake. I found Marcus Chen, but I'm 15 minutes out by snowmobile, she said. Static cut through her words. Stay put. Don't move. Don't go on the ice. I'm already on the ice, Jenny. There's something. I know, she said. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I know what it is. My grandfather told me stories. Bob, whatever you do, don't listen to them. Don't go with them. They'll try to lure you. The radio died again. I stood there, alone on the ice with my terrified dogs and a dead man beneath my feet, and I realized how quiet it was. No wind, no sound at all except my own breathing and the rapid hammering of my heart. Then I heard my buddy Tommy's voice. Tommy Reeves, who died in my arms in a fire base in Vietnam 12 years ago. Tommy, who'd taken shrapnel meant for me and bled out while I held pressure on wounds I couldn't close. Hey, Bobby, Tommy's voice said from somewhere behind me. Long time, man. Long time. I didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around. You're not real, I said. Tommy laughed, that same easy laugh he'd had. Sure I am, Bobby. Sure I am. We're all real down here. It's warm down here, Bobby. So warm. You should come see. You're dead. So will you be soon, Tommy said, and his voice changed, went higher, became something else. So cold up there, Bobby. So cold and dark. Come down where it's warm. Come swim with us. I turned around. There were dozens of them, standing on the ice between me and the shore. Tall figures, maybe 7 feet high, with sleek black bodies like otters, but standing upright on 2 legs. Their arms were long, ending in human-like hands with webbed fingers. And their faces, God, their faces were human. Men, women, children, all with those same dead black eyes and mouths full of sharp teeth. The one in front looked like a little girl, maybe 8 years old. She smiled at me. Play with us, she said in a voice like breaking glass. We're so lonely, so cold. Come play in the warm dark. Bear was howling now, a sound of pure animal terror. The other dogs were trying to chew through their harnesses, desperate to run. I backed up slowly, ice axe in my hand like it would do any good against things that could swim through solid ice. Ranger Kowalski. Jenny's voice, real this time, from somewhere behind me. The whine of a snowmobile engine cut through the silence. The creatures turned their heads in unison, fast as snakes. The little girl thing hissed, showing rows and rows of teeth that went too far back in her mouth. Jenny's snowmobile roared across the ice, headlight cutting through the darkness. She skidded to a stop next to me, grabbed my arm. Get on, now. I didn't argue. I cut my dogs loose. They'd find their way back, they were smart, and jumped on behind Jenny. She gunned the engine and we shot forward, ice spraying up behind us. I looked back. The creatures were following, not running, flowing, moving across the ice like water, impossibly fast, impossibly smooth. And there were more of them now. Dozens, hundreds, maybe, emerging from the spruce trees around the lake, all converging on us. What are they? I shouted over the engine. Kushtaka, Jenny yelled back. My grandfather's people called them river otters that steal souls. They're guardians of the sacred places, and we're in their territory. Marcus disturbed something. He drilled into the ice, right over the old drowning place, the place where the expedition went missing in 1932. The snowmobile hit a rough patch and we almost went over, Jenny corrected, kept us moving. But the creatures were getting closer. I could hear them now, not footsteps, but a sound like rushing water, like a river in flood. One of them leaped. Impossible height, 20 feet straight up. It came down on the back of the snowmobile, and I felt its hand, cold, so cold it burned, grab my shoulder. I swung the ice axe backward without thinking, felt it hit something solid. The creature shrieked, a sound like metal scraping metal, and let go. I saw it tumble across the ice behind us, then get up and keep coming. "They don't die," I screamed. "No," Jenny shouted, "but we're almost to shore. They can't leave the frozen water." That's when the ice started cracking. Not random cracks, deliberate ones. The Kushtaka were breaking the ice beneath us, opening holes, trying to drop us into the freezing water below where they had all the advantages. Jenny swerved, narrowly avoiding a gap that opened up right in front of us. The snowmobile fishtailed. I could see the shore now, maybe 50 yards away. Solid ground, safety. We weren't going to make it. More cracks spiderwebbed across the ice. The snowmobile's track was hitting water now, losing grip. We were slowing down. The lead Kushtaka, the one that looked like a little girl, appeared directly in front of us. Jenny couldn't stop in time. We hit it head on. The creature didn't move. The snowmobile crumpled like tinfoil, and Jenny and I went flying. I hit the ice hard, felt something crack in my ribs, slid 20 feet on my back before I stopped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Pain shot through my chest with every gasp. Jenny was 10 feet away, trying to stand. Her leg was bent wrong, broken. The Kushtaka circled us. Dozens of them now, moving slow, taking their time. The little girl walked up to Jenny and knelt down beside her. "You know the old ways," it said in that breaking glass voice. "Your grandfather taught you. Why do you trespass?" Jenny looked at me, then back at the creature. "We came to help. A man was lost. A man drilled into the sacred ice," the creature said. "He woke the sleepers below. He paid the price. Now you will too." "Wait," I said, forcing myself to sit up despite the pain. "Wait, the tobacco." The creature's head swiveled toward me. "What?" I remembered old Tom's stories now, the ones I'd ignored. Your guardians, protectors. We show respect with tobacco. And new offering." The creatures went still, silent. "I have some," I said, fumbling in my parka with shaking hands. I always carried a pouch of tobacco, not for smoking, but because Tom had insisted, said it was important to respect the land, to have offerings ready. I pulled out the small leather pouch and held it up. The little girl creature reached for it, then stopped. Sniffed. "Store-bought," it hissed. "Commercial, not sacred, not respectful. It's all I have." "It's not enough." The creature shrieked, and suddenly they were all shrieking. That metal-on-metal sound multiplied 100 times. The ice beneath us began to crack in earnest now, huge fissures opening up. "Bob!" Jenny was sliding toward a crack. I lunged for her, grabbed her hand. The ice beneath me tilted. We were going in. I looked at Jenny. She looked at me. We both knew. "Tell my dad," she said. "Tell him I remembered the stories." Then she let go of my hand, pushed me hard toward solid ice, and fell backward into the black water. The Kushtaka swarmed her instantly. I saw her go under, saw those sleek black bodies diving after her, and then the water froze over so fast it was like watching time-lapse photography. 1 second open water, the next solid ice. Jenny's face appeared beneath the surface, just like Marcus Chen's, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream, already withered, already dead. The Kushtaka stopped advancing, They all turned to look at me, standing there on solid ice 5 feet from shore. The little girl smiled. She was acceptable. The debt is paid. Go, Ranger, go and do not return. I have to, I started. Go. Every creature screamed in unison, and the sound was so loud I felt my eardrums pop. I went, limped to shore, collapsed in the snow. Behind me, I heard splashing sounds. Looked back to see the Kushtaka diving into holes in the ice, disappearing back into whatever darkness they came from. The last thing I saw was the little girl. She stood at the edge of the ice and looked at me with those black eyes. "We're always here," she said, "always watching. Tell them to respect the sacred places or we'll take more." Then she was gone. I don't remember much after that. I activated my emergency beacon. A helicopter picked me up at dawn. I had severe frostbite, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion. They said I was hypothermic, hallucinating. The official report called it an equipment malfunction. Jenny Nakamura's death was ruled an accidental drowning. Marcus Chen had died from exposure. The lake was placed off limits indefinitely for safety concerns. I transferred to Olympic National Park in Washington 3 months later. Couldn't handle Alaska anymore. Couldn't handle the darkness, the cold, the sounds the ice made at night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jenny's face under that ice. Saw Marcus Chen's shriveled body. Saw those creatures with their child faces and black eyes. I'm 50 now. Been in the lower 48 for 6 years, but I still hear things. Other rangers, mostly up north, who report strange encounters. Missing hikers whose bodies are found frozen solid in places they shouldn't be. Lakes that freeze and thaw at the wrong times. Sounds under the ice that sonar can't explain. No one believes them. Same way no one believed me. The reports get filed away as hypothermia, equipment failure, animal attacks. Anything but the truth. But I know the truth. Those things are real. The Kushtaka, the spirit guardians, whatever you want to call them, they're out there, living in the frozen places, protecting the sacred sites, punishing those who show disrespect. Old Tom Nakamura died last year, heart attack at 86. His obituary mentioned he was a traditional storyteller, keeper of the old ways. At his funeral, his son told me Tom had known what happened to Jenny, known why. She died protecting the sacred knowledge, he said. Dad said she was a warrior, like the old ones. Said she understood the price. I think about that a lot. About prices, about respect, about how we move through wilderness like we own it, never thinking about what might own it first. I still carry tobacco. Real tobacco now, sacred stuff, properly blessed. I make offerings at every lake I pass, every river, every place that feels old and deep and important. Maybe it's superstition, maybe I'm crazy, but I've never seen the Kushtaka again. Last month I got a call from a ranger in Denali, young guy, new to the park. Said they were planning to reopen Wonder Lake for summer tourists, build a new visitor center, drill some test cores in the ice for a climate study. I told him not to. Told him the lake was dangerous, unstable, cursed even. He laughed, said I was sounding like those natives with their superstitions. I hung up. 2 weeks later, he called back. Said 3 members of the survey team had gone missing on the lake. Just vanished. They'd found the drill abandoned on the ice, still running, bit turning in a hole that went down 40 feet. Way deeper than the lake should be. Said they'd called off the project. Lake's staying closed indefinitely. I didn't say, "I told you so." What's the point? But I'll tell you. I'll tell anyone who'll listen. If you're up north, in Alaska, in the deep winter places where the sun barely rises and the ice sings at night, respect it. Respect the land. Respect the water. Respect the stories the elders tell. Because those stories are warnings. And the things they warn you about are real. They're hungry, they're patient, and they never forget. I still see Jenny sometimes in my dreams. She's under the ice, looking up at me, mouth moving. I can never hear what she's saying, but I think I know. She's saying, tell them to stay away. So I'm telling you, stay away from Wonder Lake. Stay away from any frozen lake where the locals say strange things happen. Stay away from places where people have died in ways that don't quite make sense. Because the Kushtaka are still there, still waiting, still guarding. And if you disturb them, if you disrespect them, they'll take you down into the screaming darkness where it's always cold and always dark, and you'll never find your way home. I know. I've seen it. I've heard their voices. And sometimes on real quiet nights, I still hear them calling my name. My name is Margaret O'Brien, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've been a park ranger in Alaska for 12 years now, and I've seen things out here that would make most people pack up and head back to civilization. But what happened in June of 1987 changed everything I thought I knew about the wilderness. Before I came to Alaska, I was a nurse in Boston. Good job, good money, but I made a mistake. A bad one. A patient died because I mixed up medications during a double shift. It wasn't entirely my fault. The hospital was understaffed. We were all exhausted. But that didn't matter. The guilt ate at me every single day. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. So I ran. I ran as far north as I could go, to a place where the isolation felt like punishment and redemption all at once. Gates of the Arctic National Park became my home. It's one of the most remote places in America, 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, where the Brooks Range stretches across the horizon like broken teeth. In summer, the sun never sets. It just circles the sky, casting strange shadows that move in ways that don't make sense. In winter, darkness swallows everything for months. I learned the land. I learned basic Inupiat words from the local people who still hunt caribou the way their ancestors did. I learned how to survive in negative 40-degree weather, how to read animal tracks in the snow, how to tell when a storm was coming by the way the air tasted. I even wrote a paper on hypothermia treatment that got published in a medical journal. My supervisor said I was one of the best remote wilderness rangers they'd ever had. But I never believed the old stories. The elders would talk about things in the mountains, creatures that used to be human but became something else. Hunger spirits, they called them. Wendigo. I thought it was just folklore, the kind of tales every culture has to explain the unexplainable. I was wrong. It started on June 18, 1987. I was at my station near Anaktuvuk Pass, filling out paperwork and listening to the radio crackle with static. Supply drop wasn't due for another 3 weeks, so I was alone except for the caribou migrating through the valley below. That's when the call came through. Ranger O'Brien, this is base. We've got a situation that needs checking out. The dispatcher's voice sounded tense, which was unusual. Not much rattled these people. Go ahead, base. We got a report from an Inupiat hunting party. They say one of their guys got sick and started attacking people, eating raw meat, acting crazy. They managed to restrain him, but now he's disappeared. Left his restraints behind somehow. They want someone to come check it out. I grabbed my notepad. Could be rabies. Where's the party located? About 40 miles northwest of your position. near the old hunting grounds where that starvation winter happened back in the 20s. Something cold touched my spine when he said that. Adur heard about the 1920s winter, an unusually harsh season when a group of hunters got trapped in the mountains. When rescuers found them months later, only 2 were alive, and the evidence suggested they'd eaten the others to survive. The Inupiat had avoided that valley ever since. "I'll head out at first light," I said. "Maggie, be careful." The elder who called it in. He sounded scared, really scared. And these people don't scare easy. I packed my gear: rifle, emergency beacon, first aid kit, satellite phone, sleeping bag, and enough food for a week. The bush plane picked me up the next morning, a tiny Cessna piloted by a guy named Jake Morrison, who'd been flying these routes for 20 years. He was probably the closest thing I had to a friend up here. "Heard you're going to check out some sick hunter," Jake said as we lifted off. "Probably just some guy who ate bad meat and went delirious." "Probably," I agreed, watching the tundra spread out below us like a rumpled green blanket dotted with lakes that glittered under the endless sun. But I kept thinking about the dispatcher's voice, the fear in it. Jake dropped me off in a valley I'd never seen before. The Inupiat hunting camp should have been right there, but as the plane's engine faded into the distance, I realized something was wrong. The camp was abandoned, not just empty, abandoned in a hurry. Tents were still standing, but supplies were scattered everywhere. A cooking pot had tipped over, its contents spilled and frozen despite the summer warmth. That shouldn't have been possible in June. "Hello?" I called out. My voice disappeared into the vast silence of the tundra. Nothing answered, not even birds. I found blood near one of the tents. Not a lot, but enough to tell me something violent had happened. The trail led toward a cluster of low hills where the permafrost had created caves in the rocky ground. I'd seen caves like that before. They stayed frozen year-round, even in summer, like natural freezers. My radio crackled with static when I tried to call base. I moved a few feet to the left, tried again. More static. That was strange. Usually I could get a signal pretty much anywhere up here with the right equipment. Then I noticed my compass spinning. The needle just whirled around and around like it couldn't find north. I tapped it, thinking maybe it was broken, but it kept spinning. "Magnetic anomaly," I muttered to myself. "There's iron deposits in these hills. Nothing supernatural about it." But my skin was crawling. I followed the blood trail into the cave system. Inside, the temperature dropped so fast my breath came out in clouds. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing ice-covered walls and passages that twisted deeper into the hillside. The caves smelled wrong, not like earth and stone, but like meat that had started to rot. I found the hunting camp's supplies stacked in one of the larger chambers. Sleeping. Bags, rifles, ammunition. Everything neatly arranged as if someone had been planning to come back, but covered in a thin layer of frost. Then I found the bodies. 3 of them, partially frozen, stacked against the far wall. Inupiat hunters, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that they'd been partially eaten. Chunks of flesh torn away, bones gnawed clean in places, and the tooth marks were human. I stumbled backward, my medical training fighting with my horror. I'd seen death before, plenty of it, but never like this. This was something else, something that made my nurse's instincts scream that this was wrong, that humans don't do this, that no disease I knew could cause this. A sound echoed through the caves, a scraping, scratching noise like something being dragged across stone. I turned, bringing my rifle up, and my flashlight beam caught movement at the edge of the chamber. For just a second I saw a figure. Tall, too tall, 8 feet at least, but thin, impossibly thin, like a skeleton wrapped in gray-white skin. Its arms were too long, hanging down past its knees, and its eyes reflected my flashlight beam like an animal's eyes, but they held human intelligence. Then it was gone, vanishing into the darkness so fast I wasn't sure I'd actually seen it. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran out of those caves as fast as my legs could carry me, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. Behind me, I heard that scraping sound again, and something else, a voice maybe, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. I burst out of the cave entrance and kept running until I reached the abandoned camp. Only then did I stop to catch my breath and try my radio again. Still nothing but static. I tried the emergency beacon. The light came on, but the transmission indicator stayed dark. It wasn't working. None of my equipment was working. That's when I realized the sun was lower in the sky. Not setting, it doesn't set in June up here, but lower, approaching what passes for midnight during the endless day. And in the slanting light, I saw tracks around the camp. Huge tracks, like human feet, but elongated, with claw marks at the toes. They circled my position, multiple sets of them. I wasn't alone out here. I spent that night, if you could call it night when the sun never sets, barricaded in one of the tents with my rifle across my lap. Every sound made me jump. The wind moving through the valley sounded like whispers. Shadows that shouldn't exist in 24-hour daylight seemed to creep around the tent. But nothing attacked. When the sun climbed higher again, marking what should have been morning, I emerged to find fresh tracks all around my tent. They'd been watching me all night. I had to find out what was happening, had to understand it. That was the nurse in me, I guess. The need to diagnose, to understand the problem, before treating it. So I went back to the caves, this time in full daylight, with my rifle ready and all my courage screwed up tight. The bodies were gone. The entire chamber where I'd found the hunters was empty, just clean ice-covered stone. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined everything. But no, there was the blood on the floor, frozen solid. There were the supplies, still stacked neatly against the wall. I found more chambers deeper in the caves. In one, I discovered evidence of a campsite that had to be decades old. Equipment from the 1920s, old traps, ancient rifles, canvas bags. And carved into the stone wall was a message in English. Don't eat, no matter how hungry, it changes you. My hands were shaking as I photographed the message with my camera. What had happened here in the 1920s, during that starvation winter? A voice spoke behind me. You should leave this place. I spun around, rifle raised. An old Inupiat man stood at the chamber entrance. He must have been 70 at least, his face weathered like old leather. I recognized him. He was an elder from Anaktuvuk Pass, someone I'd met a few times before. But I'd never seen him look this scared. What's happening here? I demanded. What are those things in the caves? My family, he said quietly. My grandfather, my uncles. They got trapped here in the winter of 1926, ran out of food. They made a choice to survive. His eyes were wet, but the hunger never stopped. They ate, and still they were hungry. They became something else, something that can't die and can't ever be full. That's not possible, I said, but my voice shook. You've seen them. You know it's true. He stepped closer. They sleep during the summer, usually. The midnight sun confuses them. But this year, something woke them up. Maybe you, maybe just time. They're hunting again. We need to get out of here, I said. We need to call for help. Your radio won't work here. Nothing works right around them. They change the air, make it cold, make machines stop. He touched my arm. I came back to warn others away. But you're already here. They're already hunting you. A howl echoed through the caves. Not a wolf howl, something else. Something that might have been human once, but wasn't anymore. It was answered by another howl, and another, until the caves rang with their cries. The old man's face went pale. "Run," he whispered. "Run now." We ran together out of the caves. Behind us, shapes emerged from the darkness. 3, 4, 5 of them, the creatures I'd seen glimpses of before. In the bright Arctic daylight, they were even more terrible. Their skin was stretched tight over bones, gray-white like corpses, but they moved with horrible speed. Their faces were still partly human, but the eyes were all wrong, yellow and hungry, filled with an intelligence that made it worse, because they knew what they were doing. One of them spoke. The words were garbled, half Inupiat and half English, but I understood. "Hungry, so hungry. Join us." The old man pushed me toward the valley. "Go, I'll slow them down." "I'm not leaving you. You have to warn others. Tell them to stay away. Tell them—" His words were cut off as one of the creatures grabbed him. He didn't scream. Maybe he'd been ready for this for a long time. I ran. God forgive me. I ran and left him there. I made it back to the camp and grabbed the emergency flare gun from my pack. If Jake came back for his scheduled pickup tomorrow, I could signal him. If he didn't, well, I'd deal with that then. But I didn't have to wait. I heard the Cessna's engine that afternoon, growing louder as it approached. Jake was early. Thank God he was early. I ran out into the open, waving my arms. The plane circled once, then lined up for a landing on the flat stretch of tundra near the camp. I'd never been so happy to see anyone in my life. Jake jumped out, grinning. "Figured I'd swing by early, see if you needed—" He stopped when he saw my face. "Jesus, Maggie, what happened?" "We need to leave. Right now. Don't ask questions, just—" The temperature dropped. I mean really dropped, like someone had opened a door to winter right there in the middle of June. Our breath came out in clouds. Frost started forming on the plane's wings. "What the hell?" Jake said. They came out of the caves in broad daylight, 5 of them, moving fast across the tundra. Not running like humans run, but loping on all fours sometimes, then standing upright, their movements all wrong. The lead one was bigger than the others, and when it got close enough, I saw it was wearing the tattered remains of clothing from the 1920s. Jake started to laugh. Not a humor laugh, but the kind of laugh people make when their brain refuses to accept what they're seeing. "That's not real. That's not—" "Get in the plane," I screamed. We ran for the Cessna. Jake fumbled with the door, his hands shaking. I turned and fired my rifle at the nearest creature. The bullet hit it square in the chest. I saw the impact, saw it stumble, but then it kept coming, and when I looked closer, I could see the hole in its chest was already closing. "They can't be killed," I shouted. "Just fly, Jake, fly." We got the door closed. Jake's hands were shaking so bad he could barely turn the key, but the engine caught and roared to life. The creatures were 20 feet away, 15, 10. The plane started moving, picking up speed across the tundra. Behind us, I saw one of the creatures leap, an impossible jump that should have been physically impossible, and land on the tail of the plane. The Cessna lurched. Jake cursed and pushed the throttle all the way forward. We were going fast enough now that we should be lifting off, but the extra weight was holding us down. Through the back window, I could see the creature climbing forward along the fuselage, its claws punching through the metal like it was paper. I grabbed the flare gun and rolled down the window. The wind hit me like a fist, but I leaned out and aimed at the creature. Its yellow eyes met mine, and in them I saw hunger so vast and terrible that it made my own hunger for redemption seem like nothing. I fired. The flare hit it in the face and exploded in a burst of burning magnesium. The creature shrieked, the first sound of pain I'd heard from them, and fell away from the plane. Suddenly lighter, the Cessna leapt into the air. We climbed fast, leaving the valley behind. I looked back and saw all 5 creatures standing in a circle watching us go. Even from the air, I could feel their hunger reaching out. "What the fuck were those things?" Jake gasped. "Wendigo," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. They used to be human, but they ate human flesh to survive, and it changed them, made them into something that's always hungry, no matter how much they eat. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm going to report this. We need to get the National Guard out here, the Army, whatever it takes." "They won't believe you," I said. "They'll say you were hallucinating, altitude sickness, stress, whatever. They'll explain it away. But you saw it too. You're a witness." I touched the window, watching the tundra roll by below. "Yeah, I am." We flew in silence for a while. Then Jake said, "Maggie, there's something wrong with the engine." The temperature inside the plane had started dropping. Frost was forming on the inside of the windshield, and when I looked at the fuel gauge, the needle was falling fast, way too fast. "They did something to the plane," Jake said, his voice tight with panic. "When that thing was on it, something's wrong." We didn't make it back to base. The engine coughed and died 30 miles out, and Jake had to glide us down to a rough landing on a stretch of tundra. We hit hard, and I felt something crack in my chest, ribs probably. The plane skidded to a stop, and we both just sat there for a moment, breathing hard. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. "I'll live." "You?" "Yeah." He tried the radio. Dead. He tried the emergency locator. Dead. Damn it, everything's fried. We got out and looked at the plane. The places where the creature had touched it were blackened, like frostbite on metal. The fuel lines had frozen solid despite the summer heat. "How long until someone comes looking for us?" I asked. 2, maybe 3 days. "But Maggie," he pointed back the way we'd come. "Do you think they'll follow us?" I looked at the horizon. The sun was making its slow circle toward midnight again, and in the distance I could swear I saw shapes moving across the tundra toward us. "Yeah," I said. "They'll follow." We survived 3 days out there. I'm not going to tell you everything that happened. Some of it I've blocked out, and some of it I just can't put into words. But I'll tell you this. Fire saved us. We built a fire using the plane's fuel and kept it burning day and night. The creatures came close, circling us like wolves, but they couldn't stand the heat. Fire was the one thing they still feared. Jake didn't make it. On the second night, he went to get more fuel from the plane, and one of them got him. I found his body the next morning, hung from a small cliff face like some kind of offering. Most of his organs were gone. I don't remember much after that. The rescue team said they found me sitting by the fire, staring at nothing, mumbling about hunger. They thought I'd gone crazy from stress and dehydration. The official report says I had altitude sickness and hallucinations brought on by exposure. They classified the valley where it all happened as hazardous due to unstable permafrost conditions. Nobody goes there anymore. The Inupiat still avoid it like they always have, but now they tell new stories. Stories about the summer hunger, about things that hunt even in the endless daylight. I transferred out of Alaska 3 months later. I couldn't stay. Every time the sun stayed up late in the evening, I'd start to panic. remembering how it never set, how there was nowhere to hide. I had nightmares about yellow eyes and that terrible, endless hunger. I went back to Boston, got a job at a hospital again, started seeing a therapist. She's helped me work through the trauma of what happened to Jake, though I've never told her the real story. How could I? She'd think I was crazy. But sometimes, late at night, I research cases. Disappearances in Alaska and northern Canada. Unexplained deaths where the bodies were partially eaten but no animal tracks were found. There's more of them every year. I don't know if it's climate change waking up things that should stay frozen, or if they're spreading, or if I'm just noticing patterns that aren't really there. I keep a file with newspaper clippings and reports. Maybe someday I'll show it to someone who might believe me. Maybe not. What I know for sure is this: the wilderness is bigger than us, older than us, and filled with things we don't understand. The Inupiat elders knew that. They had stories to warn people, rules to keep them safe. But we don't listen to those stories anymore. We think we're too smart, too modern to believe in monsters. I believed that too, once. Then I saw what hunger can do when it never stops, when it becomes the only thing a creature knows. I still believe in science, in rational explanations for things. But I also believe there are spaces where the old rules don't apply. Places where eating human flesh doesn't just break a taboo. It breaks something in you, changes you into something that shouldn't exist. If you ever go to the Arctic, respect the old stories. If the Inupiat tell you a place is dangerous, believe them. If you hear about hunters who went missing, don't go looking for them. And whatever you do, no matter how hungry you get, no matter how desperate, don't eat what you shouldn't eat. Some hungers can never be satisfied. Some changes can never be undone. My name is Margaret O'Brien. I was a park ranger for 12 years, and I saw the things we're not supposed to see, the things that live in the spaces between science and story. They're still up there, still hungry, still waiting. And when I close my eyes, sometimes I can still see those yellow eyes watching me from across the tundra, wondering when I'll come back. My name is David Thornfield, and I've spent 15 years studying glaciers in Alaska. I have a PhD in marine biology. I've published papers about ice movement and whale migration. I've lived on a research vessel in some of the most remote waters on Earth. And I'm telling you right now, I never believed in ghosts or spirits or anything like that. Not until August 1991. People think being a park ranger in Glacier Bay is romantic. They picture me watching whales and taking pretty pictures of ice. The reality is different. It's equipment maintenance and water samples and trying to keep your fingers from freezing off. It's living alone on a 40-foot boat for months at a time, eating freeze-dried food and talking to yourself because there's nobody else around. I love it though. Always have. The Muir Inlet is my home territory. It's about 50 miles from the nearest town, and you can only reach it by boat or float plane. The glaciers here are different from most places. They're actually advancing instead of retreating, moving forward into the sea. Sometimes you can watch ice cliffs the size of buildings break off and crash into the water. The sound is like thunder. The Tlingit people have stories about this place. Old stories. They say the glaciers are alive. They say spirits live in the ice and you shouldn't disturb them. I always smiled and nodded when the elders talked about it, respected their culture, but I didn't believe it. That changed on August 15th. It was peak cruise season, 18 hours of daylight up here in summer. A cruise ship had anchored in the inlet that morning, and around noon, I got a radio call from the captain. He sounded nervous. "Ranger Thornfield, we've got some passengers reporting. Well, they say they saw people walking on the glacier face." I grabbed my binoculars. "Walking on the glacier? You mean climbers?" "No, sir. They say these people were walking on the vertical ice, like they were defying gravity." I knew what it was immediately. Optical illusion. The glacier face is so massive that it plays tricks on your eyes. Chunks of ice falling can look like movement. The light up here does strange things. "I'll check it out," I told him. I took my boat closer to the glacier. It was a beautiful day. Clear sky, calm water, the ice glowing blue-white in the sun. I raised my binoculars and scanned the glacier face. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just ice, cracks and crevasses, the normal texture of a tidewater glacier. Then I saw the patterns, geometric shapes carved into the ice, perfect circles, straight lines, arrangements that couldn't be natural. I'd been studying this glacier for 5 years. These formations hadn't been there yesterday. I felt a small knot form in my stomach. I dropped my binoculars and grabbed my underwater camera. Sometimes you can see more of a glacier's structure from below the waterline. I lowered the camera over the side on its tether and watched the monitor. The underwater footage showed the glacier's submerged face disappearing into darkness. The water here is 600 feet deep. And then I saw something that made my hands go cold. Shadows, moving beneath the ice shelf. Not fish, not whales. These moved wrong. They were too large, too deliberate. They seemed to be walking along the underside of the ice. I pulled the camera up quickly. My hands were shaking a little. The rational part of my brain was already working on explanations. Debris in the water, equipment malfunction. But the knot in my stomach got tighter. My compass started spinning, just slowly at first, then faster. The needle swung in circles, refusing to point north. Instead, it kept pulling toward the glacier. I tapped the compass, shook it. The needle kept spinning. I'd been around magnetic anomalies before. We have them in Alaska. But this felt different. The temperature dropped. I mean, really dropped. It went from about 50 degrees to something that made me see my breath in maybe 30 seconds. My weather instruments showed the air temperature hadn't changed, but I was freezing. I started the engine and backed away from the glacier. As I moved farther from the ice face, the temperature returned to normal. The compass settled. My hands stopped shaking, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had noticed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those patterns in the ice, the moving shadows. I'd anchored in a small cove about 2 miles from the glacier, but I could still hear it. Glaciers make noise, groaning, cracking, the occasional boom of calving ice. But tonight it sounded different. It sounded like voices. I know how crazy that seems. I'm a scientist. I deal in facts and data. But I'm telling you what I heard. Mixed in with the normal glacier sounds were things that sounded almost like words. Deep, slow words in a language I didn't recognize. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went outside. The sun was just barely below the horizon, that weird twilight we get in summer. The water was perfectly still. And that's when I saw them. Lights under the water. Blue lights glowing, moving slowly through the inlet. They looked almost like bioluminescence, but wrong. Too bright, too organized. They were moving in formation, like they had a purpose. I grabbed my hydrophone, an underwater microphone I use to record whale songs. I dropped it over the side and put on my headphones. What I heard made my blood run cold. It was like whale song, but mixed with human voices. High notes and low notes, creating harmonies that shouldn't be possible. And underneath it all, that same language I'd heard in the glacier sounds. words I couldn't understand but that somehow felt ancient. Angry. The lights came closer. I pulled up the hydrophone and backed toward the cabin. The blue lights surfaced about 50 feet from my boat. They weren't lights at all. They were beings. Figures made of glowing ice, transparent, human-shaped but wrong, too tall, too thin. Their faces were smooth and blank except for eyes like chips of glacier ice. There were 3 of them. They floated on the surface of the water, not swimming, just existing there. Looking at my boat, looking at me. I fumbled for my radio. Mayday, Mayday, this is research vessel Cetacea in Muir Inlet. Static, pure static, every frequency dead. One of the ice beings raised an arm. The water between us began to freeze. I watched ice crystals spread across the surface, turning the liquid water into solid ice in seconds. The ice reached my hull and started climbing. My boat lurched as the hull became locked in place. I ran into the cabin and grabbed the emergency flare gun. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Through the window, I could see the ice beings gliding closer. The nearest one reached the side of my boat and placed a hand on the hull. The entire vessel shuddered. Frost spread across the inside of the cabin walls. My breath came out in white clouds. I could hear the wood and metal groaning as the cold affected the boat's structure. I fired the flare gun through the open cabin door. The flare screamed out in a bright red arc, passing directly through the nearest ice being. It let out a sound, like wind through a canyon mixed with breaking glass. The being recoiled, and where the flare had passed through, its body showed cracks, like when you pour hot water on ice. The other 2 beings sank beneath the surface immediately. The damaged one followed, moving slower. The ice around my boat began to melt. In less than a minute, my vessel was floating free again, and the inlet was empty and still. I sat in the cabin until dawn, flare gun in my lap, watching the water. They didn't come back, but I knew they were still there, waiting. When the sun finally rose, I radioed park headquarters. My radio worked fine now. I told them I'd had equipment malfunctions and needed to return to base for repairs. I didn't mention what I'd seen. They'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But then I remembered Joe Kyahat, a Tlingit elder who lived in Gustavus. He'd tried to tell me stories about the glacier spirits before. I'd always been polite but dismissive. Now I needed to hear those stories. I needed to understand what was hunting me. Joe lived in a small house on the edge of Gustavus. He was 83 years old, and his hands shook when he poured tea, but his eyes were sharp. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't look surprised. "The ice walkers," he said simply. "My grandfather saw them, his grandfather before him. They're not evil, Ranger Thornfield, but they're not kind either. They're old. Older than the Tlingit people, older than the trees. They were here when the world was ice. What do they want? The glaciers are their home, their bodies. When you drill into the ice, when you take samples, you're hurting them. They don't understand that you're just curious. They think you're attacking." I felt sick. The core samples I'd been taking, the drilling. I'd been wounding them for 5 years. How do I stop them? Joe shook his head. "You can't stop ice, David. You can only respect it. Give offerings. Stay away from the sacred places." "Which places are sacred?" "All the old ice. All the deep ice. The ice that remembers." That wasn't helpful, but I thanked him and left. I had to go back to Muir Inlet. My research equipment was still there, and more importantly, I'd requested an assistant from the university. Amy Chen was supposed to arrive today to help with glacier core sampling. I had to warn her off. I got back to my boat around 2 p.m. and immediately tried to radio Amy. No response. She might already be on the float plane. I had maybe an hour before she arrived. The glacier looked different. Even from 2 miles away, I could see it. The ice was glowing, not reflecting sunlight, actually glowing from within with that same blue light I'd seen under the water. And the glacier was bigger. It had advanced at least 50 feet toward the water since yesterday. Glaciers don't move 50 feet in a day. They move inches, sometimes feet in a year. Never this fast. Something was very wrong. I heard the float plane before I saw it. The small red aircraft came over the mountains and descended toward the inlet. I waved my arms, trying to signal the pilot not to land, but he couldn't see me from that distance. The plane touched down smoothly and taxied toward my boat. Amy Chen climbed out onto the float, grinning. She was 26, fresh out of grad school, excited about everything. She had a backpack full of drilling equipment and sample containers. "Dr. Thornfield, the glacier looks amazing. I can't wait to—" "We're not drilling," I said. Her smile faded. "What? But I came all this way. It's not safe. Is there a weather system coming in?" I couldn't explain, not quickly enough, and I could see in her eyes that she thought I was being an overprotective old mentor. She'd come 1,000 miles to do field work. She wasn't going to leave without drilling some cores. "One sample," she said. "Just one, from the edge. Then we can go if you're that worried." I should have said no. I should have thrown her back on the float plane. But I was a scientist, too, and part of me wanted to know what was inside that glowing ice. We took my boat to the glacier's edge. The ice face towered above us, 300 feet of blue-white wall. Up close, the glow was obvious. Light pulsing slowly through the ice, like a heartbeat. Amy set up the drill on a low shelf where the glacier met the water. The drill bit into the ice with a high-pitched whine. Ice chips flew. She was about 6 inches deep when the drill hit something hard. Not rock, not frozen. Sediment. Something else. The drill screamed and jumped in her hands. She pulled it out, and we both stared at the hole. There was something dark inside, something that looked like it was moving. The glacier groaned. The sound was so deep and loud that I felt it in my chest. The ice shelf where Amy was standing shifted. She stumbled, caught herself, but the drill fell into the water. And then the ice opened. Not a crack, not a crevasse. It opened like a door. A perfectly rectangular opening appeared in the glacier face, and blue light poured out. Amy screamed. Inside the opening I could see a chamber, a room carved from solid ice. And inside that room were dozens of the ice walkers, hundreds maybe, standing motionless, their blank faces all turned toward us. One of them moved forward. It was taller than the others, maybe 9 feet, and its ice body was carved with the same geometric patterns I'd seen on the glacier face. It stepped out of the glacier and onto the ice shelf. Amy tried to back away and fell through. The ice beneath her gave way like tissue paper, and she plunged into the 40-degree water. I grabbed a rescue line and threw it to her. She caught it, and I pulled her toward the boat. But the ice walker was faster. It dove into the water and came up beneath Amy. I saw her eyes go wide. She stopped moving, stopped struggling. The water around her began to freeze. Ice crystals spread across her skin. Her lips turned blue. "Amy!" I screamed. She looked at me, and her eyes were different, distant, seeing something I couldn't see. "David," she whispered, "they're beautiful. There's a city made of ice. It goes down forever. It's—" The ice walker pulled her under. I dove in without thinking. The cold hit me like a fist. I could barely see in the dark water, but I saw blue light below. I swam down, lungs already burning, and saw Amy suspended in the water. The ice walker held her gently, almost tenderly, and was showing her something I couldn't see. I grabbed her arm and pulled. The ice walker's head turned toward me, and I saw anger in those icy eyes. It reached for me with one hand, and I felt the cold. Not just water cold, something deeper, cold that reached into my bones, into my thoughts. I saw flashes of images, forests of ice, mountains grinding, the world covered in glaciers, and beings like the ice walkers, millions of them, dancing across frozen continents. Then I was back on my boat. I don't remember swimming up. I was just there, coughing up water, shaking violently. Amy lay beside me, unconscious but breathing. Her skin was pale as snow, and there were patterns of frost on her face and hands. The ice walker surfaced next to the boat and looked at us. It didn't attack. It just looked. Then it spoke. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From the ice, from the water, from the air itself. Words in that ancient language, but somehow I understood the meaning. You have disturbed the dreaming. You will pay the price. Then it sank back into the depths, and we were alone. Amy didn't wake up for 3 hours. When she finally opened her eyes, they were different. The brown had faded to a pale gray, like ice that's been frozen for centuries. She sat up slowly, moving like someone in a dream. I saw their history, she whispered. David, they're not spirits. They're people, ancient people, from before the Ice Age. That's impossible. They found a way to survive. When the glaciers came, when the world froze, they transformed themselves, became part of the ice. They've been waiting, dreaming in the glaciers for thousands of years. And now we're drilling into them. We're waking them up. Her hands were still covered in frost patterns. When she touched the boat's railing, ice spread from her fingers. Amy, we need to get you to a hospital. I don't think a hospital can help me. She looked at her hands, watching the ice spread. I can feel it, David, the cold. It's inside me now. It's changing me. The radio crackled to life, static, and then that voice again. The ancient language, but now I could understand it clearly. Return what you have taken. Return to the ice, or we will take everything. I looked out at the glacier. It was advancing, fast. I could actually see it moving, grinding forward into the inlet, pushing a wall of ice and water ahead of it. At this rate, it would reach us in minutes. They want me, Amy said. I've seen their city. I've touched their world. They think I'm one of them now. You're not. You're human. We'll fight this. With what? Flares? She laughed, a hollow sound. They're glaciers, David. They're mountains of ice. They're time itself, frozen and patient. You can't fight time. But I had to try. I started the engine and turned the boat toward open water. If we could get past the advancing glacier, get out of the inlet. The water froze in front of us. Solid ice spread across the surface faster than I could drive. Within seconds, we were surrounded by a circular wall of ice 50 feet high, trapped. The glacier continued advancing from behind, slowly crushing our space smaller. Ice walkers rose from the water all around us. Dozens of them, hundreds. They stood on the ice, silent and still, watching us with those empty eyes. The leader emerged from the glacier itself, walking through solid ice like it was air. It approached the boat, and I could feel the temperature dropping with each step it took. Stay back. I grabbed the flare gun. Fire cannot stop ice. Fire only delays. What do you want? We want what was taken. We want silence. We want to dream. We'll leave. We'll never come back. The ice walker shook its head slowly. The movement looked wrong, like a puppet on strings. Too late. The dreaming is broken. The ice is awake. The world will remember cold. Amy stood up. She moved past me before I could stop her. She walked to the edge of the boat and looked at the ice walker. The frost patterns on her skin glowed with the same blue light. "I'll go with you," she said. "Amy, no." She turned to me, and there were tears on her face. They froze before they could fall. "I can feel it, David. I'm already halfway gone. The cold is comfortable now. I can hear them singing. I understand the songs. We'll find a way to reverse it. There's no reversing this." She smiled sadly. "But maybe I can slow them down. If I go willingly, if I join them, maybe they'll let you go. Maybe they'll go back to sleep." The ice walker reached out a hand. Amy took it. I lunged forward, but Joe's words echoed in my head. "You can't stop ice. You can only respect it." Amy stepped off the boat and onto the ice. As soon as her feet touched the frozen surface, she began to change. Her skin turned translucent. Her body became pale and glowing. She looked back at me one last time, and her eyes were solid ice. "Tell them I drowned," she said. "Tell them it was an accident. Don't let my parents know what I became." Then she walked toward the glacier, and the ice walkers followed her. They moved as one, a procession of frozen beings returning to their home. The leader was last. It looked at me and spoke one final time. "Respect the ice. Speak no more of us. Dream of us. And die." The ice wall began to melt. The glacier stopped advancing. Within minutes, the inlet was clear water again, and my boat was free. I started the engine with numb hands and headed for open water. I didn't look back. The official report said Amy Chen drowned during a research accident. Equipment failure, hypothermia, body loss to the glacier. The Park Service sent their condolences to her parents. They gave me 2 weeks of paid leave for trauma counseling. I never went back to Muir Inlet. I requested a transfer to a warmer climate. They sent me to the Everglades. It's good here, warm, no ice, but I can't shake the cold. Even on 90-degree days, I wear a jacket. My hands are always cold. Sometimes I see frost on my breath, even though my thermometer says it's hot. The dreams are worse. I dream of the ice city Amy saw. I dream of glaciers advancing, covering the world, returning everything to the way it was before humans. I dream of the ice walkers dancing across frozen continents, singing their ancient songs. I wake up shaking, and there's ice on my windows. Even in Florida, Joe Kyahat died 3 months after I left Alaska. Heart attack, they said, but his granddaughter told me he'd been performing ceremonies at the glacier. Old ceremonies, offerings to keep the ice walkers quiet. The Tlingit people have increased their spiritual work around the glaciers. They've asked the Park Service to restrict tourism in certain areas. The Park Service refused. Last month, a cruise ship disappeared in Glacier Bay, just vanished. They found it 3 days later, locked in ice that shouldn't have been there. All 247 passengers and crew were gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just empty cabins and frozen corridors. The official report blamed a freak weather event, but I know better. The ice walkers are awake now. The dreaming is broken, and glaciers all across Alaska are advancing, moving forward instead of retreating, despite climate change, despite warming temperatures, moving with purpose. I get emails sometimes from other rangers, other researchers. They don't say much, just things like, saw something strange in the ice, or unexplained temperature drops, or my assistant went missing near the glacier. I delete them without responding, because I know the truth, and the truth is terrible. We woke something that was supposed to sleep forever. We drilled into dreams and paid the price. Amy paid the price, and I think it's just beginning. Sometimes, late at night, I stand outside and look north, toward Alaska, toward the glaciers, and I can hear them, even from thousands of miles away. The singing, the ancient language, the sound of ice dreaming of a frozen world. The ice walkers are patient. They have all the time in the world. They've been waiting for thousands of years. They can wait a little longer, but they're awake now, and ice always remembers. If you're planning to visit Alaska, be careful around the glaciers. Don't drill into the ice. Don't take samples. Don't disturb the deep places where ancient things sleep. Some doors should stay closed. Some dreams should never be awakened. I learned that the hard way. My name is David Thornfield, and I'm the ranger who woke the ice. God help us all. My name is Samuel Ironcloud, but everyone calls me Sam. I've been a ranger in Alaska's Yukon-Charlie Rivers National Preserve for 13 years now. That's a long time to spend in one of the most remote places on Earth, where winter temperatures drop to 30 below zero and your nearest neighbor might be 150 miles away. I'm half Gwich'in on my mother's side. That means I grew up learning two ways of living. The modern ranger way with radios and regulations, and the old way with dog sleds and traditional stories. My grandfather used to tell me tales about spirit animals that lived in the northern lights. He called them the Aurora wolves. I loved those stories as a kid, but I stopped believing them somewhere around my teenage years. That was a mistake. It's March 1985 now, right around the spring equinox. This is when the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, put on their biggest shows. The sky fills with green and purple curtains of light that dance and shimmer like living things. It's beautiful, sure, but it's also when strange things happen out here. Things people don't like to talk about. I live in a small cabin near the Charlie River. Most days, my job is pretty simple. I check on trappers, make sure nobody's lost or hurt, and keep an eye on the wildlife. In winter, I do it all by dog sled. I've got 7 Alaskan Huskies, and they're not just my transportation. They're my partners, my alarm system, and sometimes my only company for weeks at a time. The dogs know things before I do. They can smell a bear from a mile away, sense thin ice before we reach it, and tell when a storm's coming hours before the sky shows any signs. That's why I should have paid more attention when they started acting strange. It began 3 days ago. I was feeding the dogs their evening meal, dried salmon and fat, the good stuff that keeps them strong in the cold. My lead dog, a big gray male named Nanook, wouldn't eat. He just stood there staring north, hackles raised, making a low sound in his throat that I'd never heard before. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine, something in between. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked him, scratching behind his ears. But he wouldn't look at me, just kept staring at the northern horizon where the first green glow of aurora was starting to appear. All 7 dogs did the same thing. They stood in their traces, completely still, staring at the lights. I'd seen them react to wolves before, to bears, to everything that moves in the wilderness, but I'd never seen them afraid of the sky. That night, the radio crackled to life around 10 o'clock. It was dispatch in Fairbanks, nearly 200 miles away. "Sam, you there? We've got a situation." I picked up the handset. "This is Ironcloud. Go ahead." "Got a call from Joe Tritt. You know him?" I did. Joe was a trapper who worked a line of cabins about 60 miles north of my position. Tough old guy, maybe 70 years old, who'd lived in the bush longer than I'd been alive. "Yeah, I know Joe. What's the problem?" There was static on the line then. He says something killed his dog team. All 9 dogs. Says the tracks aren't normal. My stomach went cold. A musher's dogs are everything out here. Without them, you're stuck, helpless. What kind of tracks? He didn't say, just kept talking about lights and shadows. Honestly, Sam, he sounded pretty shaken up. Think you can get up there and check it out? He's at his north cabin, the one by Eagle Creek. I looked out my window at the aurora. It was getting brighter, filling half the sky with green fire. My dogs were still standing at attention, still staring. I'll head out first light, I said. Appreciate it. And Sam, be careful up there. We've had 2 other reports of strange wolf activity this week. Might be rabies going around. Rabies. That was the logical explanation, the safe explanation, the one that made sense. But my grandfather's voice whispered in the back of my mind, when the lights dance bright, the spirit wolves hunt. I tried to push the thought away. I'd been a ranger for 13 years. I dealt in facts, not folklore. There had to be a reasonable explanation for what happened to Joe's dogs. I spent the rest of the night preparing for the trip. 60 miles by dog sled would take me 2 days in good conditions. I packed emergency food, extra fuel for my camp stove, a sleeping bag rated to 40 below, and my rifle, a 30-06 that had dropped more than 1 charging moose. If there were rabid wolves out there, I'd need it. The aurora kept getting brighter. Through my cabin window, I could see waves of green light rippling across the sky like water, beautiful and eerie at the same time. My dogs finally settled down around midnight, but they didn't sleep. I could see their eyes reflecting the aurora light, watchful and nervous. I didn't sleep much either. Dawn came late this far north in March, almost 9 in the morning before the sky turned from black to gray. I harnessed up the team by headlamp, speaking to them in Gwich'in like my grandfather taught me. Masi, good dogs, we've got work to do. They were nervous in the harness, dancing and whining, but they trusted me. That's the thing about sled dogs. They'll follow you into anything if you've earned their loyalty. The trail north followed the frozen Charlie River for the first 20 miles, then cut overland through spruce forest and across ridges. It was hard country, the kind that doesn't forgive mistakes. Temperature was 20 below, cold enough that my breath froze in my beard and the sled runners squeaked against the snow. Everything seemed normal for the first few hours. The dogs settled into their rhythm, pulling steady and strong. I stood on the back of the sled, 1 foot on each runner, calling out commands when we needed to turn. The wilderness was silent except for the whisper of the sled and the panting of the dogs. We stopped at noon to rest and eat. I gave the dogs dried fish and checked their feet for ice buildup. That's when Nanook started acting strange again. He lifted his head and stared into the forest, ears forward, whole body tense. I followed his gaze but saw nothing, just snow and trees and shadows. "What is it?" I asked him. He whined, a high nervous sound, and the other dogs picked it up. Within seconds, the whole team was agitated. Then I saw the tracks. They crossed our trail about 50 yards ahead, coming from the west and heading east. Wolf tracks, definitely, but wrong, all wrong. I walked over to examine them, my rifle in my hands. The tracks were huge, easily 6 inches across, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen. But that wasn't the strangest part. Around each track, the snow had a faint green tinge to it, like someone had spilled phosphorescent paint. I knelt down and touched the snow near one of the prints. It was colder than the surrounding snow, much colder. My glove stuck to it for a second when I pulled my hand back. "What the hell?" I muttered. There had to be an explanation. Maybe some kind of fungus that glowed in the dark? I'd heard of mushrooms that did that. Or maybe mineral deposits in the wolf's paws. That didn't make sense, but neither did anything else. I followed the tracks for 100 yards. They were spaced far apart, like the animal had been running at full speed. And they were fresh, made within the last few hours. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The tracks didn't follow the natural lay of the land. Normal wolves follow valleys and ridges, taking the path of least resistance. These tracks went straight, ignoring terrain completely. Up and over a steep ridge, straight through thick brush, cutting a perfectly straight line toward the northeast, toward Joe Tritt's cabin. I hurried back to my team. "Hike! Hike!" I called, urging them forward. They needed no encouragement. They were eager to get away from those tracks. We made good time for the rest of the afternoon, covering another 15 miles. But as the sun started to set and the sky darkened, I began to feel watched. It's a sensation every person who spends time in the wilderness knows. That prickling on the back of your neck that says you're not alone. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the tree line. Nothing, just shadows and snow. We stopped for the night in a small clearing. I built a fire and set up my tent, then fed the dogs and tied them on their picket line. They stayed close together, which wasn't normal. Usually they spread out as far as their chains would let them, claiming their own space. Tonight they huddled in a tight group. Darkness fell quickly. The aurora started around 8 o'clock, just a faint green glow on the northern horizon. Within an hour, it had spread across the entire sky, sheets and curtains of green light, rippling and flowing like slow-motion water. It was the brightest display I'd seen in years. The dogs started whining. I stepped out of my tent, rifle in hand. "Easy, easy," I called to them. But they weren't looking at me. They were staring past me, into the forest. I turned slowly. At first I saw nothing, just trees and shadows and the green glow of the aurora. Then something moved. It was a wolf. At least it looked like a wolf. But as it stepped into a patch of aurora light, I realized I could see through it. Its body was translucent, like colored glass, filled with the same green light as the sky. When it moved, it seemed to shimmer and phase there and not there at the same time. I raised my rifle, but my hands were shaking. Not from cold, from something much deeper and more primal. The wolf stopped about 30 yards away. It was massive, as big as the largest timber wolves I'd seen, maybe bigger. Its eyes glowed with their own light, twin points of green fire. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but was probably only seconds. Then 2 more appeared on either side of the first. Then 3 more. Within moments, I was looking at a pack of 6 translucent wolves, all watching me with those glowing eyes. My grandfather's voice came back to me. The Aurora wolves. They hunt during the lights. They test the worthy and take the unworthy. "This isn't real," I whispered. "Hypothermia, hallucination, carbon monoxide from the tent stove." But my dogs thought it was real. They were going crazy, barking and lunging against their chains. One of the wolves moved toward my team. Not walking, it seemed to glide over the snow without leaving tracks. "Hey!" I shouted, raising my rifle. "Get back!" I fired a shot into the air. The sound cracked across the frozen wilderness like thunder. The wolves didn't flinch. They didn't even seem to notice. The nearest one reached my dog line. Nanook lunged at it, teeth bared. The wolf didn't dodge or fight back. It just walked through him, like he wasn't there, like it was made of smoke or light or something that shouldn't exist. Nanook yelped and stumbled backward, confused and terrified. Then, as quickly as they'd appeared, the wolves faded. Not running away, just fading, like fog in sunlight until they were gone completely. The aurora was still bright overhead, but the clearing felt empty again. I stood there for a long time, rifle shaking in my hands, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. My 13 years of training said it was impossible, but my eyes said different. And my dogs, they knew what they'd seen. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the fire burning bright and my rifle loaded. Every time I heard a sound, I jumped. And the whole time, the aurora danced overhead, green and bright and beautiful and terrible. We reached Joe Tritt's cabin at noon the next day. What I found there would make me wish the wolves had taken me instead. The cabin looked normal from a distance. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney, but wasn't. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the silence. No dogs barking, no sounds at all except the wind in the spruce trees. "Joe," I called out. "Joe Tritt, it's Sam Ironcloud." Nothing. I tied up my team and approached the cabin carefully, rifle ready. The door was hanging open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Not torn off its hinges, just open, like someone had walked out and forgotten to close it. Around the cabin I saw dog harnesses scattered in the snow, empty harnesses, and blood. Not a lot, but enough to paint a picture I didn't want to see. Then I saw the bodies. 9 sled dogs, all dead, but they hadn't been eaten. That was the thing that made my stomach turn. When wolves kill, they eat. That's nature. But these dogs had just been killed, torn apart and left. I forced myself to examine the bodies, ranger training overriding my horror. The wounds were strange. Some looked like claw marks, but others looked like burns. And around each body the snow had that same faint green tinge I'd seen on the tracks. I found Joe inside the cabin, huddled in the corner with a blanket wrapped around him. He was alive but shaking, eyes wide and vacant. "Joe, it's Sam. You're okay now." He looked at me, but didn't seem to really see me. "They came with the lights," he whispered. "The wolves came with the lights." "What happened?" I was feeding the dogs. Must have been around 9, maybe 10 o'clock. The aurora started up, real bright. The dogs started going crazy, barking and pulling at their chains. Then I saw them. Saw what? The wolves. But they weren't right. They glowed, like they were made of the aurora itself. They moved through the dogs like ghosts, but when they wanted to, they could touch, could kill. His story matched what I'd seen the night before. That made it worse somehow. If we were both seeing the same impossible thing, it meant it was real. I got Joe warmed up and made him drink some hot coffee from my thermos. Then I used his radio to call for help, or tried to. The radio wouldn't work, just static and strange humming sounds. "Radio's been dead since last night," Joe said. "Happened right when they showed up. Everything electronic just stopped." I tried mine. Same thing. Dead static. We were on our own. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to make sense of what was happening. The logical part of my brain insisted there had to be a scientific explanation. Mass hallucination, gas leak, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon that affected perception. But the evidence didn't support that. The dogs were really dead. The tracks were really there. And both Joe and I had seen the same thing. As darkness approached, I made a decision. We're leaving. First light tomorrow, we head back to my cabin. We'll travel, together, both teams. "I don't have a team anymore," Joe said quietly. "Then you ride in my sled. We'll be slower, but we'll make it." Joe shook his head. You don't understand, Sam. They'll come back. They always come back when the lights are bright. Then we'll deal with them. You can't fight them. Bullets go right through. I didn't have an answer for that. As the sun set, I heard an engine in the distance. Snowmobile. Someone was coming. It was Mary Cluane, another ranger from the district. She appeared out of the forest on her big yellow ski-doo, stopping when she saw me standing outside the cabin. Sam, thank God. We've been trying to reach you on the radio for 2 days. When you didn't respond, they sent me to check. Radio's dead, I said. Mary, something's happening up here, something bad. She killed her engine and pulled off her helmet. Mary was Tlingit from southeast Alaska, and one of the toughest people I knew. She'd grown up in the bush like me, knew the old stories, respected the old ways. I know, she said. There've been 4 more reports of attacks. Dog teams, a trapper's camp, even a small village had something come through. All the same story. Wolves that aren't wolves, appearing during aurora displays. You believe it? She looked at me seriously. My grandmother used to tell stories about the aurora wolves. She said they were the spirits of an ancient pack that angered the sky spirits and got trapped in the northern lights forever, doomed to hunt but never to rest. Mary, we're rangers. We deal in facts. I know what I am, but I also know what my grandmother knew, and right now facts aren't helping us much, are they? She had a point. The 3 of us prepared for nightfall. We brought all our supplies inside the cabin, barricaded the door, and kept weapons ready. My rifle, Joe's shotgun, Mary's pistol. We also gathered traditional items, tobacco for offerings, sage for burning, things the old people said could protect against spirits. You really think that'll work? I asked Mary as she arranged the tobacco in small pouches. You got a better idea? I didn't. The aurora started around 8 o'clock, just like the night before. But this time it was even brighter, filling the entire sky with curtains of green and purple light. The display was so intense that it actually lit up the interior of the cabin through the windows. My dogs started barking outside. Then they stopped, all at once. Total silence. They're here, Joe whispered. I looked out the window. At first, I saw nothing. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw them. Not just 6 this time, dozens. A whole pack of translucent green wolves surrounding the cabin, their eyes glowing, their forms shifting and phasing with the aurora light. They were watching us. What do they want? Mary asked. I remembered my grandfather's stories more clearly now. They test the worthy, I said. They hunt those who don't respect the land, who don't respect the old ways. We respect the land, Mary said. Do we? I mean, really? I thought about all the times I'd dismissed the old stories, called them superstition. I've been a ranger for 13 years, and I stopped believing in the spirit world a long time ago. Maybe that's what they're testing, whether we still have that connection. One of the wolves stepped closer to the cabin. It was huge, bigger than the others, clearly the alpha. As it moved into the brightest aurora light, it became more solid, more real. I could see individual hairs in its fur, see the muscles moving under its skin. Then it spoke, not with a voice. The sound appeared directly in my mind, like a memory or a dream. Images and feelings more than words. I saw ancient hunts across ice fields. I saw the pack in their prime, strong and free. Then I saw something go wrong, a ritual interrupted, a sacred place violated. I saw the pack leader trying to defend their territory, and I saw them punished by forces beyond understanding, trapped forever in the lights, unable to rest, unable to stop hunting. They were suffering. Sam? Mary's voice seemed distant. Sam, what's happening? Your nose is bleeding. I touched my face. My fingers came away red. They're in his head, Joe said, backing away from me. They're trying to take him. The alpha wolf moved closer. Through the window, I could see it studying me with those glowing eyes. More images flooded my mind. I saw through the wolf's eyes, saw myself standing in the cabin, small and fragile, saw my dogs outside, cowering, saw Mary and Joe, their spirits bright and visible even through the walls. And I understood. They weren't evil. They were trapped, bound by some ancient wrong, forced to hunt forever. And they were lonely, so terribly, eternally lonely. Sam! Mary grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Stay with us. I broke eye contact with the alpha. The connection snapped like a rubber band, leaving my head ringing. I know what they want, I gasped. They want someone to remember them, to acknowledge what they were before they became this. What do we do? I thought about my grandfather's teachings, about respect and offerings, about the old ways of honoring spirits. We give them what they need. I grabbed the tobacco pouches Mary had prepared and headed for the door. Sam, no. Mary tried to stop me, but I shook her off. Trust me, this is what they're testing. I stepped outside into the aurora light. The wolves surrounded me immediately. I counted at least 20 of them, all translucent and glowing, all watching me with those terrible eyes. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But you don't run from wolves. They'll chase anything that runs. I walked slowly to the center of the clearing. The pack moved with me, maintaining their circle. Up close, I could see them flickering, there one moment, gone the next, like images on a bad television screen. I knelt in the snow and placed the tobacco pouches in a circle around me. Then I started singing. It was a song my grandfather taught me, one of the old Gwich'in songs about respect for the hunt, for the animals that give their lives so people can live. At first, nothing happened. The wolves just watched, heads tilted, eyes glowing. Then the alpha stepped forward. It moved through the circle of tobacco, and where its paws touched the ground, green light spread out like ripples in water. It stopped directly in front of me, so close I could have reached out and touched it, if I could touch it at all. It lowered its massive head until its glowing eyes were level with mine. And again, images flooded my mind. But this time they were different. This time the wolf was showing me what happened to them. I saw a winter thousands of years ago when the Gwich'in people first came to this land. The wolf pack had been guardians of a sacred place, a valley where the aurora touched the earth, a place of power. But hunters came who didn't respect the old ways, who killed without giving thanks, who desecrated the sacred valley. The pack defended it. They had no choice. It was their purpose, their reason for being. But the sky spirits saw only violence, and as punishment, they bound the pack to the aurora itself, to hunt forever in the space between earth and sky, never dying, never resting. Thousands of years of hunting, thousands of years of loneliness and suffering. The alpha pulled back, and I realized tears were streaming down my face. I wasn't crying from fear anymore. I was crying from sorrow. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry no one remembered. I'm sorry no one spoke your names. The wolf tilted its head, waiting. I understood then. They needed someone to witness them, to acknowledge what they had been and what they had become, to remember. You were protectors, I said louder now. You were guardians of the sacred places. You did your duty, and you were punished for it. But I see you now. I remember you now. Your sacrifice is not forgotten. The aurora overhead suddenly brightened to blinding intensity. The wolves around me began to glow brighter too, their translucent forms becoming more solid, more real. Behind me, I heard Mary scream, "Sam, get back inside. They're manifesting." She was right. The wolves were becoming fully physical, their spirit forms solidifying into flesh and bone and tooth and claw. The alpha in front of me was now completely real. I could smell its fur, see its hot breath steaming in the cold air. This was the test. Would I run? Would I fight? Or would I trust? The alpha took another step forward. Its jaws opened, revealing teeth like white knives. I stayed kneeling, stayed still, kept my eyes locked on its glowing gaze. "I respect you," I said. "I honor your sacrifice. I will remember your story and tell it to others. Your purpose will not be forgotten." The wolf's jaws were inches from my face. I could feel its breath, see my reflection in its eyes. One bite and I'd be dead. One snap of those jaws and this would all be over. Then slowly, the alpha closed its mouth. It stared at me for a long moment, and I felt something pass between us. Understanding, recognition, peace. The wolf stepped back and lifted its head to the sky. A howl emerged from its throat. Not a physical sound, but something deeper, something that resonated in my bones and my spirit. The other wolves joined in, and suddenly the clearing was filled with their chorus, a song of sorrow and release and recognition. The aurora overhead exploded into the brightest display I'd ever seen. Waves of green and purple and red light crashed across the sky like ocean waves. And in that light, the wolves began to change. They were fading, but not disappearing, transforming, rising up into the aurora itself, becoming part of the lights, no longer trapped between worlds, but finally free to be what they truly were, spirits of the northern sky. One by one, they rose up and dissolved into the lights. The alpha went last. Before it faded, it looked at me one final time, and I felt gratitude, pure and overwhelming. Then it was gone. The aurora continued to dance overhead, but the clearing was empty now. Just me, kneeling in the snow, surrounded by tobacco offerings and tears. Mary and Joe came out of the cabin slowly, weapons ready but unused. "Sam?" Mary's voice was shaking. "What just happened?" I stood up on unsteady legs. "They're free now. They're finally free." "How do you know?" I looked up at the aurora. It seemed different now, still beautiful, still mysterious, but no longer threatening. Just natural wonder, the way it had always been meant to be. "I can feel it," I said. "They're part of the lights now, the way they should have been from the beginning. Not trapped, not forced to hunt, just you existing." Joe came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Your grandfather would be proud." Maybe he would. Or maybe he always knew this would happen, always knew that one day I'd have to face the old stories and decide whether to believe. That night, my dogs finally relaxed. They ate and slept peacefully, no longer afraid of the lights overhead. Mary got her snowmobile running again. The electronics worked fine now. Even Joe's radio crackled to life. Everything was back to normal, except nothing would ever be normal again. The rescue team arrived 2 days later, a helicopter from Fairbanks carrying a doctor, an investigator, and enough questions to fill a book. We told them what we could. We showed them the dead dogs, the strange tracks, the evidence of something unusual. The official report blamed it all on rabies, a rare outbreak of rabid wolves exhibiting unusual behavior. The aurora activity was just coincidence. The electronic failures were attributed to solar flares. Joe's shock and my disorientation were listed as symptoms of mild hypothermia and stress. Everything got a nice, rational explanation. I didn't fight it. How could I? What would I say? That we'd encountered spirit wolves trapped in the northern lights for thousands of years? That I'd performed a traditional ceremony and freed them? Who would believe that? But Mary believed, and Joe believed, and the tribal elders believed when I shared the story with them in the proper way, with tobacco and respect and acknowledgement of the old powers. My grandfather's sister, a woman in her 90s named Sarah, listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "The Aurora wolves," she said. "I thought we'd lost that story. My brother tried to pass it on, but you young people..." She smiled. "But you listened when it mattered. You remembered when you needed to. That's what's important." "Are they really free?" I asked her. "Or will they come back?" She looked at me with eyes that had seen more winters than I could imagine. "They're free, but the northern lights will always carry a piece of them now. That's their home, their place. When you see the aurora, you'll remember them. And sometimes, if you look carefully, you might see them hunting among the lights, not trapped anymore, but choosing to be there. Happy. I've seen the aurora hundreds of times since that night in March 1985. And she's right. Sometimes when the lights are especially bright, I see shapes moving through them. Wolves running and playing, free at last. The Yukon-Charlie Rivers National Preserve had 2 more unexplained incidents that spring. Strange wolf sightings, mysterious tracks, electronic equipment failures during aurora displays. Then they stopped. Haven't had one since. I'm still a ranger. Still spend my winters on dog sled patrol, checking on trappers and cabins and making sure everyone's safe. But I approach the job differently now. I pay attention to the old stories. I listen when the elders talk. I teach other rangers about respect and tobacco offerings and the proper way to acknowledge the spirits of this land. Because here's what I learned that night in the frozen wilderness. Not everything has a scientific explanation. Not everything needs one. Some things exist in the space between what we can prove and what we can feel. And just because we stopped believing in them doesn't mean they stopped being real. My dogs still watch the northern lights, but they're not afraid anymore. They're just respectful. The way we all should be. Sometimes at night, when the aurora is dancing bright across the sky, I stand outside my cabin and sing the old songs. The ones my grandfather taught me. The ones about respect and honor and the sacred relationship between humans and the wild things of this world. And sometimes, I swear I can hear howling in the lights. Not threatening, not hunting, just singing along. The aurora wolves are free now, but they're not forgotten. I make sure of that. And if you ever find yourself in the far north when the lights are bright, remember what I learned. Show respect. Give thanks. Acknowledge the spirits of the land. Because they're watching. They're always watching. And sometimes they're testing whether you still remember what's really important. I do now. I'll never forget again. My name is Samuel Ironcloud, and this is my story. I know how it sounds. I know what the rational part of your brain is saying. But I also know what I saw, what I felt, what I freed that night under the dancing lights. Believe it or not, that's up to you. Just remember to look up at the aurora with respect. And if you see shapes moving through the lights, wolves running free across the sky, maybe take a moment to remember their story. They earned that much.